Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Nearly 23 Iraqis were killed and 50 others were wounded in sporadic attacks in Baghdad and Mosul. A terrorist blew himself up in a public transportation vehicle, killing 12 passengers in the area of Al-Qadamiyah. According to U.S. military sources, one American soldier was killed and 3 others were wounded in a bomb explosion.
2 terrorist attacks shook the Iraqi capital, killing dozens and injuring scores of others. A terrorist strapped with an explosive belt blew himself up in a public transportation vehicle, killing at least 12 Iraqis and injuring dozens of others in the predominantly Shiite area of Al-Qadamiyah.
A criminal strapped with an explosive belt blew himself up inside of a 24-seat public transportation vehicle, which was heading from the city of Al-Qadamiyah to the city of Al-Sadr. As the vehicle approached the intersection of Abed Fattah Pasha, it exploded, killing 12 Iraqis and injuring 17 others.
العملية الثانية التي استهدفت عددا من العمال العراقيين.
The second attack targeted Iraqi laborers looking for jobs in the Tehran Square in downtown Baghdad. A bomb exploded, injuring 20 Iraqis. According to the Ibn Nafis hospital source, 40 laborers were transported to this local hospital. They sustained moderate to serious injuries. In another development, and according to U.S. military sources, a roadside bomb exploded, killing 1 American soldier and injuring 3 others south of Baghdad. The attack targeted an American military convoy along the highway between the cities of Najaf and Karbala.
لدى مرور دوريتهم العسكرية على الطريق بين مدينتي النجف وكربلاء.
A roadside bomb targeting an American military convoy exploded.
Moreover, a bomb exploded in a crowded restaurant in the city of Mosul, killing 5 Iraqis and injuring nearly 20 others, including 14 police officers. This attack was carried out by a terrorist who left a bag full of explosives in the restaurant. This operation coincided with heavy presence of the American military forces, which rushed to the scene of the incident to investigate it.
في أسبابه.
Today, the Hamas movement intensified political negotiations with different Palestinians to form a new government. Hamas's leaders met with all Palestinian factions separately to discuss their positions towards the establishment of national unity, which may help Hamas to deal with negative international reactions for its landslide victory. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine expressed willingness to join the Hamas government. The Islamic Jihad movement renewed its refusal to join the government. At this time, talks are ongoing between President Mahmoud Abbas and Hamas leaders who will present their proposal to appoint Ismail Haniyeh as the new prime minister.
إسماعيل هنية رئيسا للحكومة.
Hamas started negotiating with different Palestinian factions and figures in order to establish an inclusive national unity government that encompasses the largest number of Palestinian factions and figures. Hamas started by meeting a delegation from the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine in the home of Mahmoud al-Zahar, the head of the Hamas negotiating team. The meeting lasted 3 hours and was described as a positive one because the points agreed upon outnumbered the differences. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine expressed its initial willingness to participate in Hamas's government and that it will give its final answer as soon as the 2 factions agree on political and social agendas.
Of course, we must unite all Palestinian efforts to confront challenges that face all of us. We decided to hold another meeting, during which we will agree on the details of certain matters. Of course, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine will join the government if we agree on a mutual program.
إذا ما جرى بلورة البرنامج الذي
A similar position was taken by different Palestinian faction, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, in which it emphasized the importance of forming a national unity government if the two reach an agreement on common denominators, especially on the political level.
دائما كنا مع حكومة.
We have always supported the establishment of a national unity government, and we will join as soon as we reach an agreement on the government's agenda based on political, social, and security matters. These matters are within the framework of international law.
Hamas's third meeting was with the Islamic Jihad movement, despite the fact that its position was known in advance. The Islamic Jihad movement did not participate in the legislative elections because it was allegedly an extension of the Oslo Agreement. However, the movement confirmed that it supports Hamas in all matters that are in the interest of the Palestinian people.
هناك اتفاق كامل في وجهات النظر بيننا وبين الإخوة.
There is complete agreement between us and our brothers in Hamas on this matter. We will not join the government, but we will support our Hamas brothers in all that serves the plight of our people. In order to protect our rights and the resistance, we are in complete agreement on the option of resistance.
عليه بشكل كامل.
Although Hamas can form a government single-handedly, it insisted on including all Palestinian factions that are willing to join in order to face the challenges of the new phase. There are indications that Hamas is trying to form a national unity government that includes technocrats as well.
In regards to America's war on terror, the U.S. Department of Defense recently launched a 2-decade-long strategy titled The Long War. This plan depends more on the military technological superiority rather than on the number of soldiers, thus benefiting the lessons learned from the September 11th attacks and the war on Iraq.
How did the American defense strategy change? Starting with the missiles of the Cold War, to what the Pentagon calls weapons of mass destruction of Al-Qaeda, to the war in Iraq, which resulted in the suffering and destruction of the Iraqi people, to what the U.S. Army faced in the violent resistance to the attacks of September 11th. The Pentagon says that all these events were lessons well learned, and that they will have ramifications in the U.S. strategy for the next 2 decades, which was announced recently.
We need to start to change the capabilities of the armed forces.
خطة الحرب الطويلة استبدلت التهديد الشيوعي بأسلحته.
The long war replaced the threat of communism and its massive nuclear weapons with the current threat of North Korea, Iran, or Osama bin Laden's Al-Qaeda organization, or others like him who do not have a state but lead terror networks throughout the world, according to the Pentagon. It is a strategy which requires an increase in the number of special forces by 15% without increasing the number of soldiers. It relies on military technology rather than large numbers of soldiers. The strategy requires massive amounts of money to develop planes like the F-22 and other complicated weaponry. However, those who criticize this plan say that the number of soldiers should be increased rather than having to rely on complicated technology.
بدلا من الاعتماد على التكنولوجيا المعقدة.
If you were to cancel these weapons, which deal with the threats in specific areas, like complicated warplanes or naval destroyers, it is better to spend the money on expanding the army, to be prepared to deal with the terrorism of today.
The plan prioritizes China, considering it a strong and active force, and one that is able to compete with the United States military. The U.S. Defense Department strategy was scheduled to be implemented in the year 2037. However, this date has been moved up 19 years due to what the Pentagon described as the uncertain nature of threats around the world after the September 11th attacks.
Hamas's top political boss arrived in Tehran overnight for high-level talks with Iranian leaders. Khalid Mashal said he will brief the Iranians regarding the latest developments in the Palestinian Authority. He also said he will be seeking financial support from the hardline Islamic regime, since Israel and the United States are conducting a campaign to get the international community not to fund the new Hamas-led Palestinian Authority government. While Israel's cabinet was deciding to halt the transfer of monthly tax revenues to the Palestinian Authority, the Hamas leader in exile, Khaled Mashal, was traveling to Iran to raise money for the cash-strapped Palestinian Authority. Joining me now in the studio to discuss the developments, Jerusalem Post Middle East Affairs reporter Orly Halpern. Orly, welcome.
Thank you.
Hamas's first stop was Tehran on this latest junket. Then they moving on to Moscow. They're looking for political support, of course, and also financial support because of the campaign being waged by the U.S., Israel, and some European countries. How successful are they likely to be in getting new funding?
Well, fairly successful. The Palestinian issue is something very close to the heart of Muslims and Arabs around the Muslim and Arab world, and people will be rallying to help the Palestinians. So that's why you see the Arab League also making concerted effort to get Arab nations to give them money. You see Iran. You see a lot of different countries that some you wouldn't even consider getting involved in this issue, such as Turkey. But they are, because they do want to help the Palestinians, even though it is a Hamas government, which is not seen in very positive eyes in the Western world.
The United States and Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice in particular in the last few days has really asked the Arab countries not to contribute to the Hamas-led government, but it sounds like you're saying they're not going to meet with much success on that front. The Arab countries, the Middle Eastern countries, are going to come to the aid of the PA.
That's correct. Condoleezza Rice is putting pressure on the Arab countries right now, and she has, the U.S. does have sway with its allies, but there are probably other ways these countries can transfer funds through charities.
This money that is going to be coming into the PA coffers now that is controlled by Hamas, especially from really extremist regimes like the Iranian regime, will it come with strings attached?
That's an excellent question. Even Hamas leaders have told me that they would prefer not to be getting the Iranian money, and in fact they would prefer to have the money from the US and the EU, because they don't want these strings that are attached to this Islamic radical government. But they said to me, you know, if you're in the sea without a ship, what are you going to do? You're going to grab onto anything that you can. But they don't want that involvement.
Yuval Diskin, the Shin Bet chief, addressed the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee today in the Knesset. He said in the long term, it's his opinion, his belief, that the money will not continue to pour into Hamas, that these countries will eventually just wean themselves from the new Hamas government.
The political leader of Hamas, Khaled Mashal, has met with the Iranian Islamic revolutionary leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who proposed a strategy in which all Muslims participate in providing annual financial support to the Palestinians. This is one way of engaging the Islamic world. Upon welcoming the head of the political office of Hamas, Khaled Mashal, Ayatollah Khamenei confirmed that Hamas's victory in the legislative elections was a result of the Palestinian people's resistance and steadfastness. Ayatollah Khamenei condemned Hamas's position of not recognizing the Zionist entity and not negotiating with it. Also, the right of return for Palestinian refugees and making Jerusalem the capital of Palestine. Khamenei described these positions as principled and right. In the first reaction to the Iranian proposal, the Israeli Broadcast Authority, IBA, said that this proposal seeks to foil all of Tel Aviv's plans to suffocate the Palestinian Authority. Commenting on the Islamic revolutionary leader Ayatollah al-Khamenei's welcoming of the Palestinian political leader of Hamas, Khaled Mashal, in Iran, the Israeli television said that the implementation of the Iranian proposal would foil Western pressure on Hamas and its threats to cut off aid to the Palestinian people.
The Hamas movement continues to carry out consultations with Palestinian factions in order to form the largest possible national unity government. The government is expected to be formed by the beginning of next month. Meanwhile, the head of the political office of Hamas, Khaled Mashal, arrived in Tehran, heading a delegation that seeks to achieve Islamic support for the Palestinian plight.
Hamas has appointed Ismail Haniyeh as prime minister. He will be tasked with forming the next Palestinian government and becoming the third Palestinian prime minister and the first from the movement. Meanwhile, the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, announced that he will meet with the leadership of Hamas today to discuss forming a national unity government. Hamas has confirmed through its many spokespersons that it will meet with the leaders of other factions in an attempt to form the largest possible national coalition. It expects that the government will be formed by the beginning of next month.
Of course, all of the advisory committees inside and outside of the Hamas movement have come to a consensus in choosing Sheikh Ismail Haniyeh as the Palestinian Prime Minister. I expect that the movement will inform President Abu Mazen in an upcoming meeting that Haniyeh will be tasked with forming the next government. He will carry out meetings and consultations with other Palestinian factions. We hope that it will be a national unity government and it will be ready by the beginning of March, God willing.
Meanwhile, the head of the Hamas political office, Khaled Mishal, arrived in Tehran, heading a delegation for talks with the senior Iranian officials in an effort to gain Islamic and Arab support for the Palestinian plight.
I consider this tour as an effort to win Arab and Islamic support for the Palestinian people.
Although Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas had said that the world should not punish the Palestinian people for their democratic choice, it appears that America, Israel, and the West are withholding aid as a punishment, a policy which has begun to have negative impacts on the Palestinian people.
It is strange. The Palestinian worker has been threatened. The future is mysterious and unknown. As a Palestinian citizen, I know that I earned a salary this month, but I do not know if I will earn anything next month, because Israel always tries to isolate us. It always tries to suffocate us, as if we are the criminals and Israel is the victim.
Hamas has confirmed that it is able to confront and overcome these punishments that attempt to stifle it.
Foreign Minister Mansour Moteki called on senior EU officials in Brussels to make collaborative efforts to eliminate nuclear arms from the global stage. He also said Tehran is committed to the removal and welcomed the peaceful solution to Iran's nuclear standoff.
I do agree there are two options available. One based on dialogue to find a peaceful solution to the problem on one hand, and the choice of confrontation on the other. I think the first option serves the interests of all. We have to build a bridge between EU concern on Iran and restoration of Tehran's legitimate right, which requires no permission from any country. Rather, the entitlement comes from the Iran's membership to the NPT. We will materialize this right. We do not accept scientific discrimination. We cannot admit nuclear discrimination.
Earlier, Foreign Minister Moteki said Tehran reserves the right to pursue nuclear activities for research and development purposes.
The Iranian top diplomat, in a joint press conference Monday with his Belgian counterpart, Karel de Gucht, stressed the importance of avoiding double standards as well as selective and politicized decisions to prove the European Union's sincerity in dealing with Iran.
We believe confidence building is a two-way road. That is not one-way road. In our relations with Europe, always we have been honest. We have completed our commitments, but from the other side, we do not have such approach.
Algeria commemorates Martyrs' Day in a silent moment of reflection in memory of those who sacrificed their lives for Algeria. This commemoration, which started in 1991, is a symbol that the Algerian government maintains with special care.
على امتداد أزمنة وحقب طويلة من تاريخنا تقف المرحلة الاستعمارية.
Throughout the ages and different eras of our history, the French colonial occupation caused the most suffering. February 18th of every year is a day of reflection and of remembrance for those who sacrificed their lives and bodies for the sake of this country. February 18th is the National Martyrs' Day. Because nations' future depends on the knowledge of their history, a moment of silence such as this one could be the difference between preserving a memory and losing all connections. The fundamental reason behind the Algerian government's decision to set aside February 18th to honor the memory of fallen heroes is to bridge two important battles: yesterday's battle for liberation as well as today's battle for rebuilding, which rests on the National Reconciliation Initiative and maintaining peace. So that the matter does not turn into mere words, the connection is back this year with only one goal in mind: to prevent this memory from disappearing into total oblivion.
وحتى لا يصير الأمر مجرد كلام عابر تعود الذكرى هذا العام ومعها من الدلالات والمعاني ما معها بهدف واحد ووحيد فقط: درء النسيان.
Among the heroes who made the independence of Algeria possible and gave the ultimate sacrifice for its freedom was Hassan Harsha. Mr. Harsha was an athlete who wore the uniform of the Taraji Galma team. However, he left sports and pursued politics. He joined the freedom fighters to drive out the French colonization forces. He took part in many battles against them, and he was martyred in 1960.
He was a patriot who grew up loving sports in his country. He played with the Taraji Galma soccer team as a goalkeeper, and the martyr Saiduni Boujum'a was his assistant. His team was one of the prominent sports teams during that period, and many players were known for their patriotism and struggle. Hassan Harsha was remembered for his heroic role in the Algerian Revolution.
Hassan and his colleague were superb people. They were good athletes and they recruited many freedom fighters. He and a number of political activists were among the founders of the Algerian Revolution.
Hassan Harsha joined the national resistance movement within the Algerian Revolution against French colonization forces. He became the director of operations in one of the Algerian districts.
He used to bring the freedom fighters home. I always asked him about that. I told him to be careful because he has children to take care of. His answer was that he was bringing them home for his children's sake and in order for them to live free in their country.
Hassan and 3 other freedom fighters were martyred in the area of Afar Ravim. Hassan was captured alive. He was shackled up and taken away by the French occupation forces. Members of the Taraji Galma team found out about his capture and spread the news around. Many of his friends rushed to see him. He was shackled and taken away by the guards to the office of the French General Vaniscal.
Hassan Harsha is one among 1.5 million martyrs who lost their lives for the sake of Algeria. They loved their country and gave the ultimate sacrifice for the sake of a free and a proud Algeria.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.